I hope this works. Hello, I hope this works a little more smoothly. I was having some trouble keeping the feed constant. It seemed to be cutting in and out during my last video, so I hope that this works better. Although I'm still seeing the screen flash on and off. So I'm hoping this works. I'm going to go ahead with it, whether it does or doesn't. Um, the psalm this week is Psalm 62, verses 1 through 8. I've been doing devotions every week based on the Psalms using a book by Dietrich Bonhoeffer, my own heroes, that collects some of his meditations and sermons on the Psalms. Today, I want to read you a sermon of his because I think it's brilliant and wonderfully encouraging, especially during a time like this. This psalm Bonhoeffer took as his sermon text in 1928 on July 15th when he was just out of seminary, just out of his doctoral thesis, I think. He was appointed to a German speaking church in Barcelona. And it was a community of German speakers who were mostly businessmen who were living with their families abroad and concerned with commercial success. And Bonhoeffer saw their need for spiritual development, discipleship, and growth. And so this was a sermon he preached to them on the 15th of July in 1928. Bonhoeffer writes, "The word soul is strange to us. Is there anything like a soul in our days, this age of machines, of warring commercial deals, in an age when fashion and sport dominate our world? Is it not just a lovely childhood memory, like so many other things? It sounds so wonderful and so strange in the shouting and confusion of voices. This little word, soul, it has such a quiet, restful sound that we can scarcely hear it above the rage and anger within us. But it speaks the language of our greatest responsibility and deepest seriousness. You, a human being, have a soul. Take care that you do not lose it, that you do not one day awake from the turmoil of your life, professional as well as private, and see that within you is an emptiness, a plaything of events, a leaf tossed here and there and blown away, that you are without a soul. As a human being, take care of your soul. What shall we say about that soul? It is the life that God has given us. It is what God has loved upon us, what He has breathed upon us out of His eternity. It is the love in us and the longing and the holy unrest and the responsibility and the joy and the pain. It is the divine breath breathed into a mortal being. To each one of you, I say, you have a soul. That is not a word of sweet childish memory or dream, but real. And with it, at the same time, comes heavy, serious responsibility that is laid upon us and for which we must answer in eternity. My soul finds rest in God. What does that mean? It is so great and holy, yet one must speak of it in human terms. And this is the Psalm, Psalm 62. I'll read you the text now. My soul finds rest in God alone. My salvation comes from Him. He alone is my rock and my salvation. He is my fortress. I will never be shaken. So that's the line. My soul finds rest in God alone. My salvation comes from Him. Um, anyway, Bonhoeffer goes on. What? My soul finds rest in God. What does this mean? It is so great and holy, yet one must speak of it in human terms. It is like the innocent child on his mother's breast, quiet and fulfilled, with all his needs met and at rest. It is like a boy, satisfied that he has seen his hero or his leader. Like the crying child who feels the touch of his mother's hand on his forehead, so that all his troubles go away and he is at rest. Like the girl, with all her worries gone when she thinks of the coming of her first child. Like the man whose passion and unrest are stilled by the glance of his beloved. Like the friend in the gaze of his true friend. Like a patient at rest before the doctor, like the elderly person rested in the face of death, and like all of us, standing in reverent respect before the silence of nature beneath a starry heaven. Thus should our soul be at rest from its turmoil and wildness and hate before the eye of God. Here all thirst is quenched, and here pleasure becomes blessedness. Longing finds its fulfillment. The hectic activity of the day finds rest in the protecting shadow of God's hand. The burdens and troubles of the day fall away and become free and restful in the sight of God. Shed and silenced in worship and adoration, my soul finds rest in God. Yes, many may say, you talk once more of beautiful things, but why do so very few of them happen? There are two simple reasons. First, we are nervous about quietness or rest. We are so used to restlessness and noise that we feel uncomfortable in the stillness, and therefore we run away from rest. We chase from one event to another, lest for a moment we find ourselves face to face with ourselves alone. We are afraid to look at ourselves in the mirror. We are bored with ourselves, and it is often the most miserable and fruitless hour when we have to be alone with ourselves. But it is not only fear of being with ourselves, facing up to who we are and our need to be cleansed, but far more we are afraid to be alone with God, lest He disturb our aloneness and discover us and deal with us. We fear that He will draw us into a one-to-one relationship and chide us according to His will. We are afraid of such an uncomfortable personal encounter with God, and therefore we avoid it, even dismissing thoughts about God in case He comes too near. It would be terrible to have to look God in the face and be responsible to Him. This fear is a symbol of our time. We live under the constant fear that suddenly we may be packed off to eternity. We would much rather be in company or in cinema or at the theater until we are taken off to the grave than spend 1 minute with God. Ask yourself if that is not true. That is the first reason why we are afraid of silence and rest. The second reason is that we know how poor our religious life is. Perhaps we made a start once, but how quickly we gave up. We say we are not in the mood. But religion itself provides the mood, so we wait until it comes over us. Then we wait, and we wait, often for years, perhaps all our life, until we are in the mood and become religious. Behind that way of thinking lies a great deception. Very well, let us allow that religion is the stuff of mood, but God is not dependent on mood. He is there when we are not in the mood, drawing us into closeness with Him. Does that thought not worry us? It is a poor person who depends upon his moods. If the painter painted only when he was in the mood, he wouldn't get very far. In religion, just as in art and science, besides the time of high inspiration, there are the necessary times of hard work and discipline. Communication with God must be practiced. Otherwise, when He surprises us, we are unable to find the right word, the right language, the right tone. We must learn God's language, learn it the hard way with much work, so that we are able to speak to Him. Even prayer must be practiced, and with great earnestness. It is a great and disastrous error to confuse religion with sentimental feelings. Religion is work, and perhaps the hardest and certainly the holiest work that a person can undertake. What then should we do to experience this rest of our soul in God? I can give you only a brief indication of some of the things we must do. There is not one of us who lives so hectic a life that he cannot spare 10 minutes a day, morning or evening, letting himself be still and quieting all around him. Let eternity alone be in your thoughts, and in its light question yourself. It can help if there is a verse from the Bible at hand, but best of all, let the mind go free and the soul find its way into the Father's house, returning home to find rest. If anyone works at this, day by day, there will be golden fruits of those times. Of course, all beginnings are difficult. One may understand this, and at the start find it quite empty. But it does not stay like that. Persist, and before long the soul awakes and begins to gain strength. Then comes the eternal rest which is found in the love of God. Then the troubles and distresses are silenced, the unrest and the hatred, the alarms and the cries, tears and anxieties, all are stilled in the presence of God. My soul finds rest in God alone. My salvation comes from him. It is a law of the world that rest and peace. Only in God is there stillness and rest. Augustine, the great church father, found the right words for this. You have created us for yourself, and our hearts are restless until they rest in you. That's the end of the sermon. That's Bonhoeffer's sermon on Psalm 62. The verse, my soul finds rest in God alone. And it's so true. I find he was such a brilliant theological mind, a brilliant scholar, but he also had such a sensitivity to the inner emotions of the heart. And the way he describes uh, our unwillingness to get religious because we're not in the right mood. The way he describes our fear, our anxiety about being alone. The way he describes our reluctance, our fear to meet face to face with